Why was a convoy of black motorcycles crawling through the desert before dawn, engines silent, lights off, as if stalking something sacred? Reeves didn't know yet that they were coming for her. The vibration reached her before the sound did, a low tremor that rippled through the thin metal frame of her trailer and into her chest like the echo of artillery. She woke instantly, the reflex of a woman who hadn't truly slept in years. Her hand reached not for a light switch, but for the pistol she kept beneath her pillow. Old habits die harder than the men who taught them. The clock read 5:47 a.m. Arizona dawn. Desert quiet. Except today, it wasn't quiet. The rumble deepened, spreading like thunder trapped beneath the earth. The coffee mugs hanging above her sink began to rattle, clinking softly like warning bells. For a moment, she thought it was just another tremor, an old memory clawing its way out of her dreams. Mosul, Kandahar, places where the air itself used to hum before it exploded. But this sound was real. A soft voice. Her daughter's. "Stay inside," said automatically, rising, sliding into her boots. The motion was smooth, practiced. The robe she'd thrown on was faded military gray, once part of a uniform, now a relic. Her eyes, pale green and steady, scanned the window slit. Headlights, dozens of them, flickered in the distance like a swarm of fireflies in formation. Then came the shape of bikes, chrome catching the first slice of sunlight. "What the hell?" she whispered. Outside, the desert shimmered gold and empty, except for the ring forming around the trailer park. A ring of engines, leather, and muscle. The kind of presence that didn't happen by accident. Her daughter called again, fear rising in her voice. Forced her tone calm, steady, the way she used to in combat when rookies froze under fire. "Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone, not even me until I say the word." She grabbed the old rifle case propped behind the door, not to fight but out of reflex. Her mind ran through tactical possibilities. No exit points. One daughter. Unknown hostile intent. Minimal cover. The math didn't look good. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the roar of engines quieted. The sound collapsed into eerie stillness. A silence that pressed against her ribs like the pause between heartbeats. The door creaked as she stepped out into the cold morning. What she saw stopped her breath. Hundreds of bikers stood in a perfect circle around her home. Chrome glinted like weaponry under the rising sun. Jackets, black leather, red patches. 81. H.A. Angels forever, forever angels. Hell's Angels. The name hit like a ricochet of disbelief. A giant of a man stepped forward from the circle, his face weathered, a scar running from temple to jaw, eyes steady as a sniper's scope. He walked toward her with the slow certainty of a man who feared nothing except breaking his word. "Reeves?" he asked. Her jaw tightened. "Yes," she replied. He nodded once, respectful, deliberate, then extended a worn leather bag toward her. "The Brotherhood doesn't forget," he said. She froze, confused. "I don't." 48 hours ago," he interrupted softly, "you fed 5 of us when you didn't have enough for yourself. You refused payment, said it was respect, not charity." He took one more step forward. "We pay our debts." The sound of engines behind him revved once, low and unified, like thunder bowing in salute. His throat constricted. Because she remembered. 2 days ago, just 2 days, 5 bikers had walked into the old roadside diner where she worked nights. Not just any night shift waitress, though no one in town knew her real past. Her badge had once been Black Ops, her rank classified. Now she poured coffee for truckers and drifters along Route 66, wearing anonymity like armor. It had been a quiet Tuesday, too quiet. The kind of quiet that used to mean ambush. She'd been refilling sugar jars when the rumble started, smaller that time, just 5 bikes. Heads had turned. Conversation had died. The kind of fear that came not from what people saw, but what they thought they saw. The door opened and they entered. 5 men in leather, eyes hard, steps heavier than they looked. Combat eyes, she'd thought instantly. The kind that had seen sand, smoke, and death. The leader, the same man now standing outside her trailer, had nodded to her with military precision. It was subtle, but unmistakable. Old soldier, maybe Marine. They had taken the back booth, ordered burgers, nothing else. Their youngest couldn't have been older than 25, hadn't spoken a word. The others guarded him like a broken limb they refused to let heal wrong. She'd recognized that silence too, the sound of grief trying to breathe. When they finished, she brought the check, $67.38. She remembered the exact number because she'd counted every dollar that week just to keep her lights on. But when she returned to the table, they hadn't touched the bill. Just empty wallets. Eyes that couldn't meet hers. The leader had said quietly, "We buried a brother yesterday. Used the last of our money to get there. We shouldn't have ordered. We'll make it right." And something in her, the part of her that remembered the nights when she'd come home from missions to nothing but ghosts and an empty fridge, had made a choice. She'd torn the check in half, then in half again. The sound of paper ripping had echoed through the diner like gunfire. "It's on the house," she'd said simply. Her boss had nearly fired her on the spot. She'd lost a day's pay for it, but she didn't care. There are debts you can live without collecting, and moments you can't afford not to honor. She hadn't known then who they were, only that they were soldiers in their own way, broken ones like her. Now, 48 hours later, the entire desert was shaking under the weight of their return. Stared at the leather bag. The memory of those 5 men burned behind her eyes, the quiet thank you from the youngest, the leader's firm handshake before they left. And now this. She wanted to speak, but her voice wouldn't form words. The man before her, the one they called Scar, nodded to the bag again. "Open it." Her fingers hesitated over the zipper. Inside were stacks of bills, bundled tight with rubber bands. She blinked, unable to trust what she was seeing. $15,000, Scar said. "Collected from 12 chapters in less than 2 days. That's what your kindness is worth." His breath caught. She'd seen this kind of generosity only once. In the field, when broken men carried their wounded for miles just to make sure no one was left behind. This was that same code, different uniform, same soul. "I can't accept this," she whispered. A second voice rose from the circle, gravelly, older, commanding. "You can and you will." The crowd parted. Another figure emerged, tall, older, presence like a storm contained behind human eyes. His leather vest bore more patches than she could count. His name was whispered even before he spoke. "Ghost." Every man there seemed to shift slightly in reverence as he approached. "The code is clear," Ghost said. "A debt must be paid. You honored our brothers when they had nothing. Now we honor you." His lips trembled. "I didn't do it for this." "I know," Ghost replied. "That's why you deserve it." Behind him, men began moving, some toward her old, broken-down Jeep parked near the fence line, others toward the trailer itself. Mechanics, electricians, carpenters. Tools appeared like magic. She blinked, disoriented. "What are they doing?" "Fixing what needs fixing," Scar said. "You paid in respect, we pay in kind." She wanted to stop them, to protest, but something in her chest cracked open instead. She hadn't felt this kind of solidarity since her unit disbanded years ago, when the government classified her existence and sent her home with medals she never wore. Now, in a desert trailer park surrounded by outlaws, she felt the one thing she thought she'd lost forever. Belonging. "Why me?" she whispered. "There are others more deserving." Ghost studied her for a long moment, then said, "Because you reminded men who've seen too much darkness that the world still holds light." For a moment neither spoke. Then behind her, the trailer door creaked. "Mom," her daughter called, "are you okay?" Turned, her voice steadier than she felt. Yeah, sweetheart, I think we're going to be okay. The engines began to roar again, not in menace but in music. A sound of unity, of something ancient reborn. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, phones in hand, unsure whether to film or pray. But Reeves didn't see a threat. She saw formation, discipline, brotherhood. And she realized that for all their patches and chains, these men were soldiers too, just fighting a different kind of war. As Ghost placed a weathered hand on her shoulder, she felt the weight of his words settle into her bones. "The Brotherhood doesn't forget," he repeated. And somewhere deep inside her, beneath the years of silence, the sleepless nights, the missions that still lived in her dreams, a single tear slipped free. Not from fear, from recognition, because she finally understood what they'd come for. Not revenge, not power, but remembrance, and maybe, in some strange way, redemption for all of them. 48 hours earlier, the desert had been mercifully still. The kind of silence that felt earned after years of noise. Reeves stood behind the counter of the Last Mile diner, the hiss of coffee on the warmer masking the faint ringing in her ears that never truly left since the war. She poured another cup, steady hands betraying none of the fatigue gnawing at her bones. The place smelled of grease, dust, and time, comfort for strangers, purgatory for her. She glanced at the clock, 3:47 p.m. Same hour she'd almost died once, Basra, 2010. The time burned itself into her like an unseen tattoo. Sometimes, when the diner was empty and the desert light bled gold through the blinds, she swore she could still smell cordite in the air. Now, the only explosions came from the kitchen. "Order up," Dale barked, sliding a plate of overcooked eggs across the pass-through. "And tell that trucker he's not getting free refills forever." Nodded, wiping her hands on her apron, the same faded olive one she'd used for years. The smell of burnt toast made her stomach tighten. She hadn't eaten since dawn, not really. A habit from the service, never get too full, never slow down. The diner was nearly empty. A retired couple sharing pie. A salesman tapping his laptop keys like they owed him something. A young mother trying to calm a crying baby. Life in fragments passing through her orbit, leaving no trace. She used to command teams. Now she commanded coffee pots. "Reeves," Dale's voice again. "Phone for you." She wiped her hands, ducked into the narrow hallway behind the kitchen, and picked up the receiver hanging on the wall. Last Mile Diner, speaking. "Mom." Her daughter's voice soft, uncertain. Smiled faintly. "Hey Grace, you okay?" "Yeah, I got the acceptance letter. Summer engineering program at ASU. I made it." For a moment, the world steadied. "That's amazing, sweetheart. You earned it." "It costs $480, Grace added quietly. "The scholarship doesn't cover the housing part." His throat tightened. "We'll find a way." She said those words before. In war, they meant survival. In peace, they meant debt. After hanging up, she leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. She pictured Grace, 16, determined, everything she'd fought for. The child who never knew the full story of her mother's life. Grace thought had been military intelligence, a safe term for a dangerous truth. If she only knew what her mother really did. The missions erased from records, the faces she still saw at night. Grace didn't need to carry that. When returned to the front, the old radio on the shelf was humming something from the 70s. She moved between tables, wiping down surfaces that didn't need wiping. Her reflection in the window caught her eye. Faint scars under the left ear, a reminder of the day a bomb took half her team. The makeup never quite covered it. The bell above the door jingled, and the sound hit her spine like an alarm. 5 men entered, sunlight breaking around them. Boots heavy, shoulders squared, the smell of exhaust and wind trailing in their wake. The room fell silent. Even the jukebox cut out mid-note as if it understood. Hell's Angels. Leather vests, patches that spoke louder than names. Customers began gathering their things, pretending not to stare. The salesman snapped his laptop shut. The elderly couple whispered to each other, eyes wide. Within a minute, they all left, leaving the diner eerily hollow. His gaze swept the newcomers automatically, threat assessment like breathing. Leader, mid-50s, scar along jaw, posture straight, eyes scanning exits. Second, broad beard, calm, enforcer type. Third, wiry, watchful, recon instincts. Fourth, older, intelligent eyes, medic tattoos. Fifth, youngest, 20-something, pale, hands trembling slightly, trauma visible. 5 men, 5 stories, 1 code. His body wanted to tense, but something else held her steady. She'd seen this before. Brothers without a war to fight. She grabbed 5 menus, walked toward them with the quiet authority of someone who had stood in front of far worse. Afternoon, she said, booth or counter. They exchanged quick glances. The leader answered, voice gravel thick with distance. Booth, back corner if that's all right. Of course. She gestured to the largest one and waited as they slid in. Coffee to start. 5 nods. She turned toward the pot, feeling Dale's suspicious eyes on her from the kitchen window. He mouthed, don't encourage them. She ignored him. She said as she poured their cups. Specials, but between us, the burgers are better. That earned the faintest smile from the youngest, quick, fragile human. 5 burgers then, the leader said. Fries and pie. Heard this place has good pie. Best on 66, she replied lightly, jotting the order. As she moved to the kitchen, she caught snippets of their low conversation. Nevada, funeral, Mason brotherhood. The words carried weight, the kind born from battlefields that weren't all overseas. Minutes later, she returned with plates steaming under cheap diner light. The leader looked up, thank you. Something in the way he said it, clipped, respectful, made her respond before she thought. My husband served, she said quietly. Navy, USS Abraham Lincoln. The man's face softened. Good ship when? Gulf War, machinist's mate, died 3 years ago. He nodded slowly. Different war, same sand. Then extended his hand. Ray, friends call me Scar for obvious reasons. Reeves. She shook it firm, even nodding the calluses, the discipline. He pointed around the table. Bear, Doc, Wolf, Tommy. The youngest Tommy gave a faint nod, eyes red-rimmed. Mason was his dad, Ray explained softly. Marine. We just laid him to rest. Took 20 years to finish the job. His breath caught. I'm sorry for your loss. Tommy's eyes flicked to hers, surprised by the sincerity, and he nodded once. She left them to eat, but her mind stayed anchored at that booth. Mason Jackson, the ghosts never rest. When the plates were clean and the pie gone, she brought the check, $67.38, and set it gently on the table. No rush. Ray stared at it for a long time, his expression shifting from confusion to shame. Then he looked up, voice rough. Ma'am, we got nothing. He opened his wallet, empty. The others followed same. We spent everything getting to Nevada, didn't think it through. Now we're heading home broke, shouldn't have ordered, that's on us. Dale's reflection glared from the pass-through window, waiting for her to enforce policy. No money, no meal. Looked from the Marine to the trembling young man beside him. Something inside her, something she'd buried under years of silence, stirred. She saw not bikers but soldiers. The same haunted posture she'd seen in the mirror too many mornings. Without a word, she picked up the check, tore it clean in half. The rip sounded louder than gunfire in that quiet room. On the house, she said softly, you buried a brother. Nobody should worry about a meal right after. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Then Ray exhaled a shaky, almost disbelieving sound. We can't accept that, he said. You're working for a living, this isn't charity. It's not, she answered. It's respect for Mason for what he gave. They stared at her as if she'd spoken a language long forgotten. Then Ray reached into his vest, unpinned a small rectangular patch, and laid it on the table. In our world, he said quietly, these mean something. It's collateral, promise that the debt will be paid. One by one, the others followed, each placing a patch beside the first, 5 tokens of a brotherhood she only half understood. When she reached for them, Dale stormed out from the kitchen. "What's going on here?" he barked. "Just thanking your waitress for her service," Ray said calmly, standing to full height. "You've got good people here." "Out," Dale snapped. The 5 men rose without argument. Ray paused long enough to meet's gaze. "You'll lose money for this." "Some things matter more than money," she said. He studied her face, then gave a single nod, the kind of acknowledgement soldiers give each other in the field. "We don't forget kindness, Reeves." When the door closed behind them, the diner felt emptier than before. Dale turned on her the moment they were gone. "Are you out of your mind? $67, that's coming out of your pay." "I know. They're Hell's Angels, not charity cases." "They're veterans," she said quietly, "and they were hungry." Dale threw his hands up, muttering curses as he stomped back into the kitchen. Gathered the 5 patches, studied them, skulls, numbers, mottos, tokens from men who lived by a different code. She slipped them into her apron pocket, unaware that she just set something in motion far larger than herself. That night back in her trailer, she counted the cash she had left, $1,243 hidden inside an old field manual. She stared at the stack, then at her daughter asleep in the next room, a geometry book still open beside her. She should felt regret for losing that day's pay. Instead, she felt peace, the kind she hadn't felt since she left the service. She didn't know that 50 miles away, Ray was making a phone call to a man the world only knew as Ghost. Didn't know that her name was being spoken with respect in a world that rarely used that word. Didn't know that a simple act in a dusty diner would echo louder than any shot fired in war. When she finally lay down, exhaustion dragged her under. The desert wind pressed against the trailer walls like an old friend whispering through cracks. She dreamed of her unit again, the last mission, the ones who didn't make it back, but this time when she reached the extraction point, there was light instead of smoke. For the first time in years, she woke without the scream. Outside in the pre-dawn dark, the desert was quiet for now. But wheels were already turning. Engines waiting. Debts remembered. The next morning, the desert wind carried dust and silence, the kind that sticks to skin and memory. Reeves moved through her shift at the diner like a ghost with a purpose. Same apron, same motions. Pour, smile, clear, repeat. The clock on the wall ticked too loudly. Every second another reminder that the world kept moving, even when you didn't. Dale had been unusually quiet since yesterday. His anger simmered just beneath the surface, like oil waiting for a spark. When he handed her the paycheck that afternoon, a yellow note was stapled to it. Unauthorized comp, $67.38 deducted. Employee responsibility. She didn't even flinch. After taxes, she took home $242 for 54 hours of labor. Rent was $450, power overdue. Her daughter's summer program application still sitting on the table, unsigned. She folded the check, slipped it into her wallet, and smiled anyway. Some debts you pay with money, others you pay with peace of mind. By late afternoon, the sun was melting into the horizon, a gold coin sinking into dust. The diner's last customers filtered out. The hum of refrigerators and the low buzz of neon signs filled the quiet. Dale locked the register with a sigh. "You heading out?" "Yeah," replied, grabbing her coat. "Be careful on that highway," he said. She looked at him, surprised at the flicker of concern. "I always am." Outside, the world stretched wide and endless. The desert had its own heartbeat, slow, steady, indifferent. Her old Jeep sat motionless in the dirt lot, transmission dead. So she walked. 3 miles home, same as always. The road hummed beneath the weight of her thoughts. Her boots kicked up dust. Each step a whisper of past missions, the endless marches through heat and silence where one mistake meant none of them came back. Funny how those instincts never fade. She still scanned horizons, still tracked shadows that weren't there. By the time she reached the trailer park, the stars were emerging sharp and cold. Grace was at the kitchen table, pencil in hand, calculator glowing beside her. "Hey, kiddo," said, closing the door behind her. "Hey," Grace smiled faintly. "Did you eat?" "Had a burger at work." Lie, she hadn't. She given her dinner plate to Charlie, the stray three-legged dog that lived near the dumpster behind the diner. Some habits die hard. Taking care of the forgotten was one of them. Grace slid a paper across the table. "Programs due next week. If I get in, they'll let me shadow real engineers." Looked at the paper. $480 tuition. She nodded slowly. "We'll find a way." Grace studied her mother's face. "You always say that. Do you ever believe it?" His chest tightened. "Every time." Later, after Grace went to bed, she sat at that same table, the lamp throwing soft light across stacks of bills. Rent, power, water, a final notice. She started dividing what little she had, rationing hope like ammunition. Her mind drifted to the 5 patches on her dresser, symbols of a brotherhood she barely knew, yet somehow trusted. She picked one up, thumb tracing the skull embossed in leather. "Angels forever, forever angels." The phrase felt strange on her tongue, almost sacred. She wondered if those men ever made it home, if they remembered her at all. Probably not. The world didn't reward kindness, it just absorbed it and moved on. She didn't know that 60 miles away, her name was being spoken in reverence by men who rarely spoke at all. Ray sat in a dim garage, the air thick with oil and memory. Around him were 8 others, veterans in leather, not uniforms. On the wall hung a flag, tattered but clean, stitched with the numbers 81 and the words "respect earned, never given." "Her name, Reeves," Ray said quietly. "Fed us when she didn't have to, paid for our meal out of her own pocket, didn't flinch, didn't judge, just saw us." Across from him sat Ghost, gray hair pulled back, face carved by scars, eyes like cold fire. His hands rested on his knees, still and deliberate. "You're saying she looked at you and didn't see the patch," Ghost said. "Yeah, she saw soldiers." "She's not the first." "She's the first in a long time," Ray countered. "Didn't hesitate, lost her pay because of it." Ghost's gaze didn't waver. "Then the code applies, we pay our debts, always." The room stilled. Men nodded, silent agreement passing like current through wire. Ghost reached for his phone. The old model looked out of place in his hands, but when he started typing, the world began to move. One message, encrypted, simple. "Operation Payback, for Reeves. Brotherhood repays its debts." Within an hour, phones buzzed across 12 states. California, Nevada, Arizona, Texas, Colorado, New Mexico. One woman's name riding shotgun on a digital road of loyalty and vengeance redeemed. By midnight, the network was alive. Messages in code, calls made, funds gathered, routes mapped. Each chapter knew what to do. Ride light, ride fast, bring what's needed. When morning came, the first wave rolled out. Meanwhile, woke to the sound of silence, the kind that hides storms behind it. Grace was already gone for school. The house felt too empty. She made coffee, staring at the cracked window pane as the desert stretched beyond. She thought of calling the power company again, asking for another extension. She decided not to. Pride wasn't useful, but it was all she had left. At noon, she returned to the diner. Dale didn't say much. He didn't need to. The way he handed her the worst tables said enough. The tourists wanted smiles. The regulars wanted coffee. No one wanted to hear about the waitress who gave away meals to bikers. By 3, whispers started small, sharp, poisonous. The other waitress leaned on the counter. "I heard you gave away $60 worth of food yesterday," she said. Kept her voice even. They were veterans. Veterans snorted. "They're Hell's Angels. You're lucky they didn't rob the place." "They didn't," replied quietly. "They thanked me." "Some of us can't afford to be noble," muttered. "Some of us have bills." "So do I," said softly. "Still worth it." When her shift ended, Dale tossed her a dish rag. "Lock up. I've got errands." She nodded. He didn't even look at her. That evening she walked home under a sunset so beautiful it almost hurt, the sky painted in oranges and purples, like a desert on fire. By the time she reached the trailer park, Grace was waiting on the steps, face tight with worry. "Mom, the power company called again. They said if we don't pay by Friday." "I know," said, "I'll figure it out." "And Mrs. said there were bikers here earlier. They were asking for you." "Stopped cold? What bikers?" "I don't know, big guys. She said they didn't cause trouble, just looked around. One of them took pictures." Pulse quickened. "Pictures of what?" "Our trailer." The desert wind shifted. She forced a calm smile for Grace's sake. "Probably nothing, don't worry." But worry she did, through dinner, through dishes, through the quiet hours after. When Grace went to bed, stood by the window for a long time, watching headlights flash on the far highway like ghosts passing through. She thought about reaching for the rifle under her bed. Instead, she reached for her coffee mug and took a slow sip. She learned a long time ago that fear only wins if you give it something to hold. Across the desert, the rumble began. Ray rode point, his slicing through the Arizona dark. Behind him stretched a convoy, 50 strong and growing by the hour. At each junction, more joined. From Flagstaff, from Tucson, from El. Each one carrying supplies, cash, and something rarer, intention. Operation Payback wasn't about money. It was about code. They stopped only for fuel. By midnight, 100 bikes thundered down the I-40 like a heartbeat with no owner. Locals filmed from overpasses, their phones catching glimpses of chrome and leather moving like a single organism. Ray's phone buzzed once, message from Ghost. "All chapters inbound. ETA 5:45, don't scare her, honor her." He smiled faintly under his helmet. "Copy that." Back in her trailer, sat cross-legged on the couch, bills spread around her like battle plans. Her breath came slow and measured. Every calculation ended the same. Not enough. Always not enough. She opened the field manual again, the one hiding her savings. $1,243, the sum of 3 years of skipped meals, double shifts, and uncashed favors. If she used it all, she could keep the lights on, pay rent, maybe cover Grace's program, but then, nothing left. No safety net. No ammunition against the next wave life fired at her. She exhaled slowly, eyes closing. She'd been a sniper once, precision, patience, control. This was no different, just another kind of target. She would aim carefully and survive one more month. She didn't know that far beyond the horizon, a storm of engines was gathering, not to harm her, but to surround her with the one thing she thought she'd lost forever. Respect. By 4:30 a.m.'s alarm buzzed. She rose automatically, brewed black coffee, and pulled on her jacket. Her boots scuffed against the floorboards. The air felt heavier than usual, charged with something she couldn't name. Then came the first vibration. Faint, distant. Like thunder that couldn't find its storm. She frowned, stepping to the window. Headlights too many. A tremor crawled through the ground. Her mug rattled. Grace's sleepy voice from the bedroom. "Stay inside," she said again, this time not as a waitress but as what she truly was, a soldier preparing for whatever came through that door. She didn't know yet that what was coming wasn't war. It was gratitude. 1,000 engines worth of it. The desert never screamed, it rumbled. Felt it before she saw it, the low vibration crawling up through her boots and into her chest. The sound swelled, rolling across the open flats like a memory come alive. 1,000 heartbeats in unison. Then came the light. Headlights endless, blinding, carving through the darkness. Chrome and leather and thunder converging from every road that led toward nowhere. She stepped out onto the porch, rifle slung loose in her right hand, heart tight in her throat. Behind her, Gray stirred. "Mom, what is that?" "Stay inside," said quietly. "Lock the door." The horizon glowed with the reflection of 1,000 moving machines. The noise was alive now, shaking the air itself. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming, caught between the war she'd left behind and the peace she could never quite find. The first line of bikes appeared through the dust. Hell's Angels, hundreds of them. Rows upon rows, forming an unbroken circle around her home. The roar softened to a low hum, synchronized, respectful, a formation, not a threat. The desert wind carried the scent of oil, leather, and heat. Then silence. The engines cut off one by one, until the world felt unnaturally still. A single figure dismounted from the front. Ray. The scar along his jaw caught the early sun, but his eyes were calm, almost solemn. He walked forward slowly, flanked by 2 others. Behind them stood Ghost, tall, weathered presence commanding without effort. "Reeves," Ray said, his voice steady. She nodded once. "That's me." He gave a slow nod back, then turned and motioned. A man stepped forward carrying a worn leather duffel. "We don't forget kindness," Ray said softly. 48 hours ago, you gave 5 hungry men a meal and refused their money. You said it was respect, not charity." He gestured to the rows of riders. "They told the Brotherhood. We listened." She swallowed hard. "You came all this way for this." Ghost's voice cut through the air like gravel dragged across steel. "We came because loyalty isn't a word, it's a debt, and you paid yours first." The man with the bag stepped closer, handed it to Ray, who held it out toward her. Inside was money, bundles upon bundles, wrapped, labeled, counted. The sight made her throat tighten. "What is this?" $15,000, Ray said. "Every chapter pitched in, cash, no strings, use it however you need." "I can't take this." Ghost took one slow step forward. "You can, and you will. This isn't payment, it's honor returned." Shook her head, voice trembling. "I didn't do it for this." "That's why it matters," Ghost replied. The silence that followed was heavy, not awkward, not hostile, just full. The kind of silence that carried weight because nothing else could match it. Behind them, engines idled low, like an orchestra waiting for the conductor's cue. Glanced toward her trailer, the cracked siding, the peeling paint, the patched windows. A life held together with grit and tape. She thought of her daughter asleep inside, of the nights she'd prayed for help that never came. And now this. Men society feared, men she was told to avoid, men who'd seen too much of the same darkness she had. And they came not to take, but to give. She didn't realize her hands were trembling, until Ray gently closed them around the leather straps of the bag. "Take it," he said quietly. "Not because you need it, but because we owe you something you can't measure." Her voice came out low, cracked. "Why me?" "Because you saw us," he answered. "You didn't see criminals, you saw soldiers who'd lost their war." Ghost nodded slowly. "That's rarer than gold these days." One of the younger bikers stepped forward, Tommy, the kid from the diner. His eyes were brighter now, grief softened by gratitude. He handed her a small black patch. "For your jacket," he said, "our mark of respect." She took it carefully. It was their insignia, the winged skull, ringed by flames but stitched in white instead of red. Pure, untouched. "White patch?" she asked. "Honor color," Ray said. "Only a handful exist. given to those who show the brotherhood what humanity still looks like. Her throat closed. She didn't trust herself to speak. Ghost's gaze softened. You remind men like us what it means to be decent again. Behind them, more movement. Several men began unloading gear, toolboxes, lumber, paint cans. Others examined her old Jeep, shaking their heads with amusement. What are they doing? She asked. Ray smiled faintly. Fixing what needs fixing. You paid with respect. We pay in kind. I can't let you. You can, he said, interrupting gently. Let them, it's what we do for our own. The word "our" lingered like an echo she didn't know how to receive. She stood there frozen, watching strangers, outlaws by law, brothers by choice, rebuild her home piece by piece. Someone replaced the shattered porch step. Another rewired her front light. Two more cleaned the Jeep's engine, talking quietly as the sun climbed higher. It was surreal, beautiful even. For the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. She turned to Ghost. You all served, didn't you? He nodded once. Most of us, Army, Marines, Navy, some couldn't leave it behind. Others had nowhere to go when they did. I know the feeling. I figured you did, Ghost said softly. You've got that look. What look? The one people get when they've seen too much and still choose kindness anyway. For a moment they just stood there, two soldiers from different wars, bound by the same invisible scar. Your daughter, Ghost said after a pause. She's the one you're fighting for, right? Blinked, how do you? Ray mentioned. We looked you up, Reeves. Don't worry, we don't pry. We just needed to make sure this was misplaced charity. And he smiled faintly. You check out. More than that, you inspire. So consider this a reinforcement drop. He nodded toward the Jeep, where a biker had just slammed the hood shut and grinned. Runs like new. She couldn't help it, she laughed. A quiet, startled laugh that felt foreign and good. You people are insane, she said. Ray grinned back. You'd fit right in. The morning stretched out, filled with the steady rhythm of men working. Hammer strikes, laughter, engine revs. For hours, the desert became something it hadn't been in a long time, alive. By noon, the trailer's faded panels gleamed under a fresh coat of paint. The porch had a new railing. The power line that had sagged dangerously was fixed. Her Jeep purred like it remembered purpose. When it was done, Ghost called everyone in. Brothers, he said, voice carrying easily through the dry air. We came to repay a debt, and we did, but this woman, he turned to, she reminded us what the code means. Respect given, respect earned. That's the law of the road. Hundreds of men bowed their heads. The sound of engines revving once, deep and synchronized, rolled across the plain like a hymn. Grace stepped out onto the porch, barefoot, eyes wide. The sight of so many bikers in perfect formation made her freeze. Motioned gently. It's okay, they're friends. A ripple of laughter broke through the crowd, low, warm, genuine. Tommy stepped forward again, holding something small. For her, he said, offering Grace a pin, silver wings with a single white feather. Means your family now. Grace looked at her mother, nodded, smiling softly. Say thank you. Thank you, Grace said shyly. You earned it, Tommy replied. Then Ghost looked at one last time. You gave when you had nothing. Now you have something money can't buy. She stared at him, and what's that? He smiled, small, tired, true. A reminder that the world still remembers good people. They stood there in silence as the first engine started again. The air filled with vibration, dust rising like smoke. One by one, the riders turned their bikes toward the horizon, peeling away in perfect order. When the last of them disappeared into the golden haze, the world felt impossibly quiet again. Only the smell of exhaust and paint lingered. Grace turned to her mother. Mom, who are they? Stared out toward the fatting dust. People who don't forget, she said softly. They went back inside. On the table sat the open duffel, stacks of cash untouched, gleaming faintly in the afternoon light. Grace stared, wide-eyed. What are we going to do with it? Looked at her daughter, the same question echoing through her own heart. What do you do when kindness comes back like a storm? She didn't have an answer yet, only a feeling deep, steady, humbling. That night after Grace fell asleep, stepped out onto the porch again. The moon hung high, soft light tracing the desert's quiet edges. She sat on the new railing, running her fingers over the smooth wood, smelling the fresh paint. Every corner of the place whispered of those who'd been there, the laughter, the engines, the brotherhood. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out the white patch, turned it over in her palm. Respect given, respect earned. The words echoed inside her like a prayer. She pinned it to the inside of her jacket, close to her heart, unseen, but always there. When she finally whispered into the night, her voice was barely a breath. Thank you. The wind carried it away, somewhere over the dark stretch of desert highway where the Brotherhood rode. And far beyond, under a blanket of stars, Ghost's convoy rumbled on. No destination, just purpose. Somewhere in the distance, a voice crackled over the radio. Mission complete, angels clear. Ghost smiled beneath his helmet. She'll never forget this. Ray's voice came back, low and certain. Neither will we. By morning, the desert looked ordinary again. But nothing felt ordinary anymore. The air outside the trailer was still, too still. Reeves stood on the porch with her coffee mug cooling in her hands, staring at the horizon that only yesterday had thundered with 1,000 engines. Now there was only silence. No roar, no chrome, no ghosts. Only tire marks carved deep into the dust, a circular scar around her home. Grace stepped out behind her, backpack slung over one shoulder. You didn't sleep again. I did. Her daughter raised an eyebrow. Mom, you're still in the same clothes. Smiled faintly. Then I guess I slept well in them. Grace hesitated, then glanced at the horizon. Were they really bikers? Yeah. Like the real ones, the scary ones people talk about. Took a sip, eyes on the distance. Not scary, just loyal. Grace didn't answer, the silence stretched. Finally, she said, they fixed everything, even the Jeep. Why would people like that help us? Looked down at her daughter, the question landing harder than it should. Because sometimes, she said quietly, the people who've seen the worst parts of the world are the ones who can still recognize the good in it. Grace frowned slightly. You sound like you're talking about yourself. Smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Go catch your bus. After Grace left, the world seemed too big again, too quiet. Sat on the steps, watching the dust shift in the breeze. Every few minutes her eyes drifted to the leather duffel bag inside the doorway, untouched, full of money she hadn't asked for. It wasn't the amount that unsettled her. It was the meaning behind it. Respect returned, loyalty acknowledged. And yet, what did she do with it now? By noon, the questions arrived, not from her conscience this time, but from people. A county sheriff's cruiser pulled up first. The door opened and out stepped Sheriff Dale, broad-shouldered, mid-50s, the kind of man who measured respect in silence. He tipped his hat. Morning, Miss Reeves. Morning, Sheriff. Mind if I ask what in God's name happened out here last night? Folded her arms, calm. Just visitors. Visitors? He chuckled. Ma'am, half the town thought a gang war was starting. I've got reports of 800 bikes rolling through the highway in formation. You got any idea how much panic that caused? She shrugged slightly. They didn't break any laws. No, they didn't, he admitted. Didn't even litter, cleanest outlaw gathering I've ever seen. He studied her for a long moment. They were here for you, weren't they? Seems that way. Why? Hesitated. Because I fed 5 of them. He blinked. You what? They couldn't pay. I told them it was on the house. The sheriff whistled softly. Well, looks like you just made yourself a friend in every biker within 1,000 miles. They don't owe me anything, she said. They sure think they do, he replied, and word spreading fast. She frowned. Word. Social media's full of it. Someone filmed the whole thing, posted it an hour ago. Waitress honored by the Brotherhood. It's already gone viral. Her chest tightened. Viral. He nodded, town's buzzing. Some folks think it's inspiring, others, he sighed. Others think you're mixed up with them, you know how people talk. Of course she did. Had spent years learning that the world preferred simple stories, good and bad, hero and villain. But real life was made of gray. After the sheriff left, the phone began to ring. First reporters, then strangers, then old acquaintances she hadn't heard from since before her service, all wanting something, a quote, a comment, a headline. She ignored them all. By evening, the diner was packed. Word had reached Dale long before she arrived for her shift. He stood behind the counter, arms crossed, face red with something between fury and awe. He said, voice tight, "You planning to tell me why my parking lot was full of Hell's Angels yesterday morning?" "Because I fed 5 of them 2 nights ago," she said simply. "You fed them. They were broke. Do you realize what that means for this place?" "Free advertising," she offered dryly. Dale didn't laugh. "It means trouble. The sheriff says news crews are coming. If they find out my waitress is the one at the center of it, this diner turns into a circus." "I didn't ask for this," she said quietly. "Yeah, well, fame doesn't need an invitation." She walked past him, tied on her apron, and started pouring coffee. The first customer that night, a trucker, smiled wide when he recognized her. "Hey, you're the lady from the video. You fed those bikers, right?" Froze for just a second before nodding. "Yeah, that was me." He grinned. "Damn, you got guts. They say you used to be military." She didn't answer, just poured his coffee and moved on. By the end of her shift, she could feel the eyes on her, curiosity, admiration, suspicion. A mix she'd felt before, in uniform, on foreign soil. She closed up late, the sound of the bell above the door echoing long after it stopped moving. Outside, the desert smelled like rain. She drove home in silence, the repaired Jeep humming smooth beneath her. When she reached the trailer, the moon was high and silver. Grace was already asleep. Sat at the kitchen table, turning the white patch over in her fingers. Her reflection caught in the window, a face lined not by age, but by memory. And that's when the past began to stir. She saw it like film spooling across her mind. The sand, the gunfire, the radio crackle. Target 2-1 confirmed, proceed to cover. Her own voice calm, even answering back. Copy that, eyes on. Her hands had been steady then, her rifle resting on a crumbled wall outside. The world smelled like metal and dust. She'd waited 37 minutes for a clear shot, breathing in rhythm with her heartbeat. When it came, it was clean, one squeeze, one less ghost in the dark. Afterward, she'd found what was left of her target, a boy, maybe 18, maybe younger, a rifle beside him, his hand still clutching a photo of his family. That night, she'd stared at that photo until dawn. War didn't break her, it hollowed her. She came home with no parade, no closure, no real mission left. So she built one: serve coffee, raise Grace, stay invisible, because invisibility meant safety. But invisibility came at a cost. She stopped believing people could still surprise her, stopped believing decency was contagious. Until 5 men walked into her diner. And one simple choice, one plate of food, brought back something she'd thought she'd lost forever. Faith. Not in God, not in the system, but in people. She exhaled slowly, setting the patch down beside the duffel bag. There were things money could fix, bills, tuition, cars. And there were things it couldn't. The next morning, she made a decision. She packed the money into smaller envelopes, 15 in total. She labeled each with quiet precision. 5 for the diner staff, who struggled as much as she did. 4 for veterans housing in Phoenix. 3 for the local food bank. 2 for the women's shelter down the road. 1 for Grace for her future. When Grace woke, the table was full of labeled envelopes. "Mom, what's this?" Smiled softly, redistribution of respect. "You're giving it away." "Most of it." "But why they gave it to you?" Looked at her daughter, eyes steady. "Because kindness doesn't belong to one person, Grace. It's like light, it's meant to be passed on." Grace didn't fully understand, but she nodded anyway. Later that day, drove into town. The looks came again, curious, judgmental, admiring. She let them all pass like dust through wind. At the diner, she handed Dale an envelope for the staff fund. He frowned, opened it, blinked. $5,000 where did? From people who still believe in honor. For once, he had no words. She turned to leave. He stopped her. "Reeves, I misjudged you." She smiled faintly. "Most people do." That night, after everything was quiet again, sat outside under a blanket of stars. The desert stretched endlessly ahead, silent, watchful. The horizon still bore the faint tracks of 1,000 tires, glowing faintly in the moonlight like sacred writing across the earth. She thought of Ray, of Ghost, of Tommy, of how people the world called dangerous had shown her what real strength looked like. And somewhere between memory and gratitude, she whispered, "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts." Her voice faded into the wind. Far away, on some open road lit only by moonlight, a small convoy rode through the desert. Ghost at the front, Ray beside him, the sound of engines blending with the rhythm of the night. No one spoke, they didn't have to. Respect had already been given. And in their world, that meant it would never die. For a few days, the desert went quiet again. Too quiet. The kind of stillness that follows after thunder, not peace, just the pause before the next noise. Tried to pretend life had returned to normal. She went back to the diner, poured coffee, wiped counters. But every time the bell above the door chimed, half the room looked up, wondering if the famous waitress would appear. Famous. She hated the word. By the third morning, a white news van parked outside the diner. Cameras, microphones, smiles that didn't reach the eyes. Dale met her at the kitchen door, nervous and sweating. "They're here for you, Reeves, Channel 8, they say it, human interest." Froze, "Did you tell them anything?" "Only that you work here, they already know the rest." She exhaled slowly, shoulders tightening. "Then I'll talk to them, once." The reporter was young, too polished, too eager. "Miss Reeves," she began, voice bright, "your story has inspired millions. The footage of those bikers repairing your home has over 10 million views. How does it feel to be a symbol of kindness in a divided world?" Blink then said quietly, "I'm not a symbol. I'm just a person who fed someone hungry." The reporter smiled wider, unsatisfied. "But there's more, isn't there? Our research shows you're former military, Army intelligence, correct?" His jaw tightened. "Some things don't need to be public. People want to know who you are." "I'm a mother," she said simply. "That's all they need to know." The interview lasted 3 minutes. By evening, it was everywhere. War veteran waitress shows bikers what respect looks like. Mysterious female vet receives unexpected brotherhood salute. The headlines turned her act into a story. The story turned her life into noise. Grace showed her the videos at dinner. "Mom, people are calling you the angel of Route 66. Almost laughed. "I spent my life trying not to be noticed." "Well, too late," Grace said, smiling. "Everyone knows now." But that night, when the phones kept ringing, the laughter faded. Old names appeared in the caller ID, people from her service years. And one name she never expected. Major Reed Samuels. She hadn't heard his voice in 12 years. Reeves. Even through static, the tone was unmistakable, calm, low, steel under velvet. Sir, I saw the video. Didn't think you watched daytime television. I don't, but when one of my best NOC assets shows up feeding outlaws on the news, the Pentagon notices. Her pulse quickened. I'm retired. You were retired, he corrected. You're being requested for consultation. Consultation on what? Human terrain, southwest border zone. They need someone who understands loyalty networks like the one that just surrounded your house. I'm done, Major. There was a pause. You keep saying that, but I don't think you believe it. She didn't answer. After he hung up, she sat there for a long time, staring at the dark window. Her own reflection looked older, harder, a soldier pretending to be a waitress pretending to be invisible. Grace appeared in the doorway. Mom, you okay? Yeah, lied, just tired. But the truth was moving under her skin again, restless. Duty doesn't die quietly, it waits. By morning, the story had caught national fire. Talk shows debated it. Veterans forums called her a hero. Conspiracy channels claimed the bikers were mercenaries repaying a secret mission. At the diner, people lined up not for food, but for selfies. Endured it silent, polite, detached. Every thank you felt heavier than the one before. Around noon, a man in a gray suit walked in. Military posture, government haircut. He sat at the counter, ordered black coffee, and waited until the place emptied. Then softly, Agent Reeves. She froze. You've got the wrong person. No, ma'am, I've got the right one. Langley's been trying to find you for 6 months. You disappeared clean after the Damascus file. She met his eyes, and I plan to keep it that way. He slid a card across the counter. We're not here to drag you back, but your name carries weight again. Use it. There are people who still need what you can do without a gun this time. She looked at the card, then at him. You think a viral video changes that? He shrugged. Sometimes a small act starts bigger things than bullets ever could. When he left, she didn't throw the card away. She slipped it into her pocket, like a seed she wasn't ready to plant. That night she drove out past the edge of town, where the road split into desert and silence. The same place her unit once trained before shipping out. The stars above looked exactly as they did back then, cold, patient, watching. She parked, turned off the engine, and sat in the dark. Her thoughts moved backward through years. Basra, Kabul, the night she lost, the order she disobeyed to save civilians. How that single act of defiance cost her career, but kept her soul. She'd always chosen compassion over command, and paid for it every time. And yet here she was, again being asked to choose. Hide or serve. A soft light appeared in her mirror, a single motorcycle approaching. She didn't move. The bike stopped beside her. The rider removed his helmet. Ray. Didn't mean to scare you, he said. Ghost sent me. She relaxed a little. You always show up out of nowhere. Only when the world starts taking too much from good people. He leaned against his bike, watching the horizon. Ghost wanted you to know the Brotherhood's proud. You reminded them what respect looks like. Some of the guys are talking about starting a veteran outreach run. Food, repairs, scholarships, all under your name. She blinked. My name. Yeah, the Reeves ride has a ring to it. She shook her head, half smiling. I didn't do any of this to be remembered. Ray looked at her for a long moment. That's exactly why you will be. The wind picked up, carrying dust and faint echoes of engines miles away. He straightened his helmet. You know, Ghost says you've still got that soldier stance, like you're waiting for orders. Gazed out at the desert. Maybe I am, just trying to make sure they're the right ones this time. He nodded once, started the bike. Whatever you choose, we've got your six. When he was gone, the darkness felt lighter somehow. Back home, Grace was waiting on the porch. Where'd you go? For a drive. Another one of them came by, the guy with the scar. Ray. Grace nodded. He left this. She handed her a small metal tag, military style, engraved with a number and a single word, honor. Turned it over on the back, respect earned, not owed. She closed her fist around it, feeling the weight. Not heavy, grounding. The next morning, she called the number on the card from Langley. A woman answered, Operation Support DC. This is Reeves, she said. Tell Major Samuels I'll help on my terms. Understood. Welcome back, ma'am. She hung up, looking toward Grace, who was studying at the table. Back to work, her daughter asked. Not that kind, said. Just helping people stay alive without picking up a weapon. Grace smiled softly. You always find a way. Brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's face. That's what soldiers do when the war ends. We build something worth protecting. A week later, a new headline appeared. Former operative launches program connecting veterans and brotherhoods to help struggling families. Didn't attend the press conference. She stayed home, patching Grace's bike tire, watching the sunset burn the sky gold. Somewhere far away, she could almost hear the rumble again, the brotherhood riding another highway, carrying food, supplies, purpose. And she realized something profound. The mission had never really ended. It had just changed shape. Now the battlefield wasn't cities or deserts, it was hearts. And she was finally winning. That night, as stars pricked the sky, sat on her porch, the tag warm in her hand. She thought of Ray, of Ghost, of all the nameless faces she'd once tried to forget. Then she thought of the boy she didn't save, the orders the kindness that had cost her everything. And she whispered to the desert, to them, to herself, to anyone still listening. Maybe war teaches us how to fight, but mercy teaches us why. The wind answered with silence. And for the first time in years, that silence felt like peace. By autumn, the road outside the Last Mile diner no longer felt lonely. Every weekend, convoys thundered through, smaller ones now, 30 bikes here, 20 there, each with crates strapped to the back and banners reading Reeves Ride, Respect in Action. They stopped at food banks, VA clinics, reservation schools. No speeches. Just engines, deliveries, and handshakes. Watched it unfold from the background. She refused interviews, turned down money, and kept working double shifts, though Dale finally stopped docking her pay. I figure you bought this diner more goodwill than I ever could, he said once. She only smiled. But not everyone smiled. By October, government attention sharpened from curiosity to concern. 1,000 bikers riding under a single veteran's name looked, on paper, like an organization. And organizations made bureaucrats nervous. One Tuesday morning, 2 SUVs rolled up to the trailer park. Men in suits, sunglasses, credentials flashed faster than politeness. Grace peeked through the window as opened the door. Miss Reeves, the taller agent said, Homeland Liaison, mind if we talk? Depends who's asking, she replied evenly. We're conducting a review. Large gatherings, interstate rides, funds moving across chapters. People want to be sure everything's legitimate. It is. I'm sure, he said smoothly, but the optics. That word, optics, the military's favorite excuse for fear. She cut him off. You worried about optics, agent, or about a bunch of men you can't control doing good without permission? He hesitated, then smiled the way men do when they're losing control of the conversation. Just keep it clean, Ms. Reeves. You've got influence now. That's power whether you like it or not. When they left, Grace exhaled. They think you're in trouble. Close the door gently. No, they think I'm capable. A week later, she flew to D.C. for the first time in years. Major Samuels met her at the terminal, same crisp posture, same unreadable eyes. "You started a movement," he said as they walked. "I started a ride." "Semantics. Congress is citing you in hearings about veteran reintegration." She laughed softly. "And you brought me here to smile for cameras. To testify, they want your voice." She stopped. "You're serious?" "Completely." He handed her a folder. Inside were photos, food drops, repairs, classrooms filled with kids high-fiving tattooed riders. Below each image, Reeves' Ride Outreach Initiative. "You did this," he said, "whether you accept credit or not." "I didn't lead them," she replied. "You inspired them, same thing." The hearing room smelled of polished wood and politics. Reporters filled the back rows. Flashbulbs popped like small detonations. When took the stand, she felt the old rhythm of briefings return. Steady breath, direct answers, no wasted words. "Ms. Reeves," a senator asked, "how did this begin?" "With a meal," she said. Laughter rippled, uncertain whether she was joking. "I fed 5 men who couldn't pay. They told others, that's all." Another senator leaned forward. "You're aware that several of these motorcycle groups have criminal histories?" "Yes. I'm also aware most of their members are veterans who were trained by the same government questioning them now." A pause. "You're saying they're heroes?" "I'm saying people don't stop being human when the headlines stop caring." The room went quiet. Later, as cameras crowded her exit, a reporter shouted, "Ms. Reeves, are you starting a political movement?" She shook her head. "No, just a reminder." "Of what?" "That respect isn't classified." Back home, the silence of the desert felt gentler. Until the letter arrived. No return address, no postage stamp, just her name typed neatly. Inside, one photograph. A dusty street. Her, 12 years younger, kneeling beside a collapsed building inn, cradling a child. And behind her, the same boy she'd shot. Alive. The image was grainy, impossible. But his eyes, those same frightened eyes, stared straight at her. On the back, one line written in Arabic and English, "Mercy survives." Her hands shook. Hell. She'd seen him fall. She reported the kill. And yet here he was, grown, standing beside a relief convoy, smiling. She sat down hard, the photograph trembling between her fingers. Grace found her minutes later. "Mom." Swallowed, just history catching up. That night she couldn't sleep. The old guilt she'd carried like shrapnel shifted inside her, but this time it didn't cut. It healed. Maybe she hadn't taken a life that day. Maybe she'd saved one, by aiming an inch wide, by choosing mercy even when she told herself it was mistake. Maybe kindness had always been her rebellion. By winter, Reeves' Ride became more than convoys. Veteran shelters received funding. Small towns built workshops teaching mechanics to returning soldiers. The Brotherhood chapters stopped wearing red for 1 day each month, switching to white patches to honor peace over vengeance. Reporters called it the White Run. Called it enough. But not everyone agreed. Late December, an extremist offshoot of another club tried to hijack one of the convoys near Tucson. They wanted the supply trucks. 2 riders were injured defending them. No deaths, but it was close. The news erupted. Suddenly, the same senators who praised her demanded regulation. Commentators questioned her leadership. Even Samuels called. "You built something real, but now it's vulnerable. You need to address the public before someone else defines you." She hesitated. She'd spent her life avoiding spotlights. Now the mission needed her voice. The press conference took place on a cold January morning, outside the diner where it all began. Hundreds gathered, veterans, families, bikers in white patches, cameras glinting like rifles in the sun. Stepped to the mic wearing her plain jacket, the white emblem stitched inside near her heart. She looked out at the crowd, at the faces hardened by loss yet softened by belonging. "I was trained to fight," she began, "to see threats before kindness, but war ends. Hunger doesn't, loneliness doesn't, forgetting doesn't, so we ride for anyone who's ever felt left behind." The wind carried her words, clean and clear. "We're not saints, we're not saviors, we're just proof that broken people can still build things that matter." A long silence followed, heavy with meaning. Then from somewhere in the back, an engine revved once, low, respectful. Another joined. Then dozens. A symphony of steel and gratitude. She smiled, stepped away from the podium, and whispered to no one in particular. Mission accomplished. That evening, she and Grace sat on the porch watching the sun die behind the hills. Grace leaned against her shoulder. "You think it's over now?" Shook her head. "Nothing good ever really ends. It just keeps finding new roads." Grace was quiet for a moment. "Did you ever regret joining the military?" Considered it. "No, I regret forgetting why I did. And now I remember." She looked at the photograph again. The boy she thought she'd killed, alive and smiling. Mercy survives. Somewhere far down the highway, headlights shimmered in a long, rolling wave. Another ride setting out under the night sky. Whispered a quiet benediction only the wind could hear. "Ride safe, brothers, keep the code." The rumble faded into the dark. She watched until the last light disappeared, her reflection faint in the window beside the white patch hanging there like a small piece of moonlight. And for the first time in decades, she allowed herself to feel proud. Not of what she'd fought, but of what she'd chosen to save. The desert always keeps its promises. It remembers every tire track, every footprint, every vow spoken under its sky. Months passed, the rides grew quieter, the press found new stories. But the road still hummed on weekends, a low pulse that reached her porch like a heartbeat she could never quite let go of. Reeves sat on the railing she once watched being rebuilt, coffee steaming in her hand. The horizon burned orange. The same dawn that had once brought 800 engines now carried only the whisper of wind through mesquite. Grace stepped outside, taller now, hair tied back, college brochure clutched in her fingers. "Mom," she said, smiling, "I got in, full scholarship. They want me for the renewable energy program." His breath caught. "Full." "Full," Grace said again, laughing through a tear. "Even housing." The sound of her daughter's joy filled the air the way engines once had, powerful, human, alive. Pulled her close. "You did it." "No," Grace said, shaking her head. "We did." By noon, the mail truck left a single brown envelope in the box. No return address again. Inside, a dog tag, not the one Ray had given her, older, hers. The one she'd thrown into the Tigris River after her last mission. She turned it over. The inscription was scratched but legible, EREVES, no blood type listed. Below it, a new engraving in careful script, "Still watching your six." A small photo slipped out next to Ghost and Ray standing beside a new convoy, all white patches, all smiles. On the back, scrawled in marker, "The road never ends. Thank you for showing us where it begins." She closed her eyes. For a long time she just breathed. 2 weeks later, she drove out past the edge of town to an old airfield the Brotherhood had rented for their annual meet. This time, no cameras, no media. Just riders, veterans, families. A community built from respect instead of fear. Ghost was waiting near the hangar, hands in his vest pockets. "Didn't think you'd come," he said. "I didn't either." He smiled. "You look good, Reeves." "You look tired." "Comes with leading a few thousand stubborn men who suddenly want to do good," he said, laughing. They walked together along the runway, engines rumbling in the distance. She got in, said quietly, "Your girl. Full ride, renewable energy, says she wants to build things that last." Ghost nodded, wonder where she got that from. They stopped near a row of bikes gleaming under the sun. Ghost handed her a small metal case. "Open it." Inside was a medallion, the Brotherhood emblem surrounded by a ring of white enamel. Across the top etched words, "Honor in Action." Across the bottom, Reeves' founding code. She blinked, "Founding what?" He shrugged. "We needed something to keep the mission clean. You wrote it even if you never meant to." She looked up at him. "I'm not your leader." "No," he said softly, "you're our reminder." Behind them the engines roared once, not in salute, but in gratitude. As dusk fell, bonfires dotted the field. Children ran between bikes, dogs barked, someone grilled over open flames. It wasn't a gang meet, it was a reunion. Ray handed her a plate and a grin. "We kept it simple, burgers like the first night." She sat with them until the stars came out, listening more than talking. Stories flowed about rides that reached hurricane zones, veterans they'd helped find jobs, families they'd fed. It struck her that this was what peace looked like when warriors built it themselves. Imperfect, loud, full of laughter and scars. When she finally stood to leave, Ghost walked her to the Jeep. "You still carrying that guilt?" he asked. "Some of it." He nodded toward the night sky. "Good, means your compass still works, just don't let it aim backwards." She smiled faintly. "That your version of wisdom?" "That's the only kind I've got left." They shook hands. No salute, no ceremony, just understanding. The drive home was quiet. Halfway down Route 66, she pulled over at the spot where the 5 bikers had first walked into her life. The old diner's neon flickered weakly now. Dale had retired, sold it to new owners who renamed it the White Patch Grill. Through the window she saw photos lining the wall. Her, the Brotherhood, the first convoy. She didn't go in. Some memories were better left watching from the road. She rested her hands on the steering wheel, the night breeze moving through the open window, and let the stillness settle. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was waiting for orders. For the first time, she simply was. Back home, Grace had left a note on the table. "Orientation starts in 3 days. I'll be okay, I promise." Under it, the photograph of the boy from Now a Man, standing beside a new aid convoy. Someone had circled a line from an article in English translation. "He says an American soldier once spared his life. It taught him mercy." Stared at it until her vision blurred. Then she laughed quiet, shaking, grateful. All the circles were closing now. The next morning she walked to the ridge behind the trailer, where the desert spread like an ocean of light. She carried 2 things, her old rifle dismantled and her service tag. Piece by piece, she buried the rifle parts under the stones. The metal caught the sunlight one last time before vanishing into sand. The tag she kept. She slipped it onto her chain, beside the new one Ghost had sent. 2 halves of a life finally balanced. When she looked up, a small line of bikes was visible on the far highway, glints of silver, a trail disappearing into morning. She whispered, "Safe roads." Years from now, people would still tell her story. They'd get the details wrong, they always do. Some would call her a hero, some a myth. But the truth would remain simpler. A woman who once believed her war had ended, discovered that compassion was just another kind of mission. A meal became a movement. A forgotten soldier became a map. And a world that had grown tired of noise remembered what quiet courage sounded like. That evening, Grace packed for college. Helped folding shirts, labeling boxes. When it was done, they sat on the porch one last time together, the desert humming under the stars. Grace leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. You ever wish you'd done things differently? Thought about it, the missions, the guilt, the bikers, the long road back to herself. Then she smiled. No, every mistake taught me the right kind of kindness. Grace nodded slowly. You think the world changes from stuff like that? It already has, said. They sat in silence, listening to the wind. Somewhere far away, faint as memory, an engine revved once respectful, familiar. Smiled into the dark. Sounds like the boys are still riding. Grace laughed softly. Guess they never stop. No, whispered, neither do we. The desert swallowed the night, patient and eternal. And in that silence, where engines once roared and ghosts once whispered, a single truth remained, steady as heartbeat, quiet as faith. Sometimes the loudest battles end not with victory, but with mercy. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And